Hello and welcome to the Sub1 YouTube channel, and in this video part 3 of Fred's left shoulder rebuild. I've figured out at the end of the last video we had an issue with the worm bouncing around, and I had assumed it was associated with clearance issues on the gear for the worm gear. When I started looking into it further off camera, I actually found one of the ball bearings had actually gotten in underneath the worm gear under here. It was running along, and that was what was causing it to bounce. So with that issue fixed, it now works quite well. So as you can see, that's working nicely now. Now, some of the testing I've done, I can actually poke the potentiometer into this and it will actually stop rotating, which is what we want. This mounts on the left shoulder, so if the body is facing forward, the body is on this side, there's 2 points that on the front clavy and the back clavy for the left, a bolt goes through and into here. So let's get all that. This is the original part that the nut was held in and connects to a reference pot for this part. But before we play around too much with all of that, let's actually get this part on there. So for that, I just want to turn off the servo. Now there is a screw hole underneath the servo, so we are going to have to take this off. And then this sits on top here and gets screwed on. So this is the shorter screw. It's a 20mm by M2.5, and that's the one that goes at the top where the pivot point is. Remember, there's no nut in here, so it is just screwing into the plastic itself. Okay, so that works. Now this pot holder will sit in this hole and hold. I can use the old one, but I will use the new one. And then we set this up like so. And then we put a screw in the little hole that's over here. If I can get a good close view of that. So there's a small hole right here which we can drill out to put a screw in, and this is the piece that can be rotated to adjust the rest position. The old one used 2 screws to hold the pot down into that, so we'll pull those out and see how we go. So what I'm looking for in the bottom there is to make sure that the little pot part is poking into the worm gear. So I think that's roughly where I want this sitting at the moment. So I'll have to grab another screw and lock it down. So this is the piece that came out of the original one, and it's got its screw in it still, so we'll use that again. So now that we've got that part done, let's get our piston servo on. So let's get this bit on first because it's the hardest to get on. And this will come around and go on into here over the top of the shoulder joint. Now I've got one of these printed somewhere. And that will poke through there and gets keyed into the back clavy, which we'll install as we install the whole shoulder. And there's a nut captive inside to hold the bolt. Now I've used what's called a nylock. And this has a small nylon component within the nut to help bind the nut onto the bolt as it goes through, so that it doesn't rattle loose or work its way loose. Alright, so the next side is this side. There is another race of bearings need to go in here, and then we need to install this component, and I'll put its name on the screen as well. Inside here we have two nuts. I've inserted, I think, both of them already. One in here and the other one in here. When this gets put on, we have two screws to go through. These are M3s, and they are 30mm long. Now there's two of those. One goes through this, but when we get to the next piece, this is the top of the arm rotator. It pushes up over here, and that hole there in this raised piece lines up with the hole in the worm gear, and so the other screw goes through there to help pull it in. And then we have these two shoulder braces, and again I'll put their names on the screen. This is the front one, and this is the back one. Now on the back one, I've actually notched out a little piece here for the pot wires to go through, but we'll come to that a bit later. So in the meantime, let's get our grease and our bearings in and get this ready to go. Now that's the top on this side, and this goes to the bottom. It says top on the actual part. We will fill that up with grease though. Now we don't want to over tighten this, otherwise you'll bind it all up. Here's my tight spot right there. And that appears to be good. Okay, so on the sides here, there's provision for two more screws. So again, M3. And these ones are 20mm long. And I do need to put an M3 hex nut in there. So I've just got to grab one of those. Here's my screw starting to poke out. Cool, so that works. So the next part we need to look at is the next gearbox. So I'm just going to put this aside for now. I can't do anything with this pot until we mount it back in the shoulder, and this will go into the connections for the servo here. This will get fed up and into the connections around the same area, and we will end up with one more coming through going to the connections in the shoulder area as well. So here's our parts for the next gearbox, and I'll just look up what they are. So here we're looking for the rot center version 3. This is the rot gear version 6, and the rot worm version 5, and what they call rot tit version 4, which sits on the top here. So they're the parts that make up this section. As you can see, I've processed these ones to be clear. I've already inserted the nuts into this one as part of the testing, and when this goes on, we'll want that one to be aligned out here when it's at its rest position. This will be closer to center in its rest position compared to the shoulder, mostly because we can rotate the arm in or out. So I have actually tested these dry, make sure they do fit in, and that turns quite happily by hand. There's no bearings in here yet, so we've still got to put those in with the grease. But before we get to any of that, let's recover the old servo motor. Alright, so this is the old rotator. So let's pull it apart. So you'll note there's a nut on this side, and the screw comes up from the other side. All the rest go down. So we will need to install the nut in there before we assemble it too far. Now these ones I'm pulling out are M3, and in the new one they're all M2.5s. This has also got a couple of screws up from underneath, so we will need to take those off as well. I might just hold off doing that because there's a heap of bearings in there and a heap of bearings in the middle as well. All I really need to get out is the worm, and I'll recover the bearings later. Okay, so we need to attach this, and that goes onto there, and this goes into there. But I will also have to install nutserts into here. So I'm just going to go off camera and do that. I'm going to drill it out the same way as I did the one last week. Fill it up with a little bit of resin and push the nutsert in. And then I can pull it out, and I can use the same original screws that I used last time. Right, I'll be back shortly. Okay, so I drilled these out to 4.5mm. Used a brush to get some resin in. With the nutserts on the end of a screw, I pushed them in. That makes sure that the resin doesn't clog up the thread. And I did that for all 4, then put it back in for a 10-minute cure in the ultraviolet cure machine. So that's now done. I've also drilled out the holes here to 3mm and then countersunk for these counter flathead screws. So we'll take this piece, which is the servo horn, drop its screw in there, line this for one of the holes in the horn and screw it in. Now, like most of these worms, there's a hole down the middle to reach the screw at the bottom. Now, I'm not going to do that all the way up just yet. For a minute there, I thought I printed out the wrong one. So that seems to be turning quite nicely and freely. There's no grease in there at all yet. So our next trick will be to grease this up, install bearings and drop this in. We'll grease it up, drop this in and install bearings. And try not to get one in under here like I did on the last one. Now these bearings get slippery when you put grease on them. Okay, that appears to be working. The next thing I need to do is install the top cover and all of the screws. So I think I might do that in the next video because this one's starting to get pretty long as it is. If you like these videos, don't forget to click on like, subscribe and ring that notification bell. It's also a form of support that helps the channel a great deal and costs you nothing, and it will help let you know when the next video comes out. If you'd like to support the channel further, I do have a Patreon account and you can join my VIP patrons Go Lucky and Lorenz Berger and my Builder patron Elmerels45 in supporting the channel. If you've got any questions, leave a message in the comments below or drop into the Discords, any one of them. I'll leave links to my Discord, the Inmoov Discord and the MyRobotLab Discords. If you've got any questions, one of us might be able to help you out with, and we'll see you in the next video.